Oh,
Okay.
You are live.
Hi, good morning. Welcome to Coffee Talk. I am here with a true entrepreneur, Scott Brogan. I'm going to go through just some of the things that you have dipped your toe in, or maybe the whole foot, or dove in.
head first.
Yeah, you can tell me. So you were the writer for a syndicated comic strip, the director of a spa for the rich and famous. That's insane. And also a tennis resort. Scott created Scoopdaddy ice cream, which that's down on St. Armand Circle.
Was, yep.
And then you are starting a rum company, which is very exciting, and the partner in Fresh Produce, which is a woman's clothing line. So my question for you is, what on earth
Was I thinking?
has guided your life to do all of these different things? Because that is quite the impressive, and I'm sure there's more. I'm sure these are just kind of the big things. But you're also a mentor. Like, tell me what got you into all of this.
Well, the funny thing about it is I always joke that I can't keep a job, right? So, but I really think I have this thing called business deficit disorder, where I try something for a while. I love being new to something. And I don't mind, as I was saying earlier to you, I don't mind being bad at something. In fact, I kind of like it. And I like going in, and I'm the first one to admit in a business meeting, like most recently here with the Rum Company, I really don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I do have a really good eye for talent, and I can find talented people. And I mean, you guys are a little young but you remember Dick Clark in American Bandstand, right?
Totally.
I know Dick Clark's New Year.
Yes.
something.
Okay. All right.
yeah,
So
yeah,
he
yeah.
had this show that ran for like 30 or 40 years, American Bandstand. And he was basically bringing in these musicians and had a dance show, and he would talk to them. And he couldn't sing, he couldn't dance, he didn't have any musical talent whatsoever, but he was really good at bringing all the people together and having a production.
Yeah.
So I've always felt like it was really my only skill. So when you realize what your limitations are and when you know what you don't know, it's a real advantage in the business world. So I think the common denominator in all of those is I had no idea what I was doing, but I could really find people who did, and I was good at hiring them. And at the spa, for example, I'm going to graduate school, and I'm in exercise science. And so there was a spa nearby, and it was Elizabeth Taylor and Johnny Cash and all these famous people coming to it. And I'm like, I'm an exercise physiologist. I want to be. There's all this next door, and it's in a hotel world, and they're bringing in people, and they're exercising. I think I should work there, But I had never worked actually in a fitness facility where they were just starting to become big. So I go over and apply, and I fill out the resume, which was based on a true story, and it kind of listed my master's degree, which sounded really impressive, but no background. I get a call like 2 weeks later, and they're like, hey, do you guys want to be a racquetball pro? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Sign me up.
I had never stepped foot in a racquetball.
Really?
And they wanted me in the next day because the racquetball guy just quit and left. So I'm like, yeah,
And
sure.
did
no
you ever
problem.
wonder why he just quit?
I thought about it. I found out later, yes.
Will you pull this mic just a little tiny bit forward?
Forward?
Yeah, like away from you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So my roommate, who is now a circuit judge in Palm Beach at the time, was going to law school, and he had played racquetball before, but there was no gym open, and this is like 10 o'clock at night. So he goes into the kitchen, and he takes an aluminum foil, and he rolls it into like a ball. And we go in the dining room, which was rectangular and shaped like a racquetball court, and he takes the aluminum foil and hits it up against the wall, and he goes, okay, you have to hit the front wall first, okay? And then you got to, so here we are, we moved all the dining room table away or whatever, and we're practicing racquetball, but it's aluminum foil. So the next day I get in, and my lesson's at 9, and I've got a whole day booked, and the first guy, I just walked in and I go, this is what I did. I know nothing about racquetball and aluminum foil, but I'm a pretty good athlete, and by the end of the day, I think I can have this down. But I'm not going to charge you. I mean, I'm going to charge you, but I'm going to reimburse you in cash, so that they don't know. And he just thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And he was a billionaire from somewhere, So he taught me sort of how to play racquetball, so that by the 10 o'clock lesson, it was better than aluminum foil. I just could see how the ball was bouncing. And by 4 o'clock, nobody knew.
Wow.
And 6 months later, I'm director of the plays and running it. So it was just a classic example of my life in an analogy. Yeah.
That sounds a lot like, have you heard of Steven Spielberg's beginnings in filmmaking?
No.
He basically, this is allegedly, I don't know if this is completely true, but it was in his documentary, so it has to be true, right? He apparently snuck into an office in one of the big studios and just laid claim to the office and was like, I work here now. And then they just kind of were like, oh, I guess he works here now. And then it just kind of became that.
And
So
then,
it was one of those things where he just snuck into a place that he didn't quite belong and then faked it until he made it.
He made it, yeah, right.
So is that kind of your...
Steven Spielberg and I have very parallel careers.
You are, yes. Exactly.
Yeah. But no, that's pretty much it, times 5 or 6 different businesses.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the very first one that you ventured out? What was like the biggest risk? Because I'm sure the first one was probably something that was very exciting. I'm sure you have a lot of memories surrounding that.
You know, it's funny. When I was a kid, my first entrepreneurial adventure was I went out to play golf with my dad, and I was hitting a lot of balls in the woods. And I would hit one ball in the woods, and I would come out with 5. And because, you know, as a kid, you like toads and frogs and things. And it was like, and I said, Dad, what are these balls worth? And, you know, he said, they're probably worth 50 cents or $1. And I'm like, so this is like an Easter egg hunt. There's dollar bills sitting in these woods, you know.
Right.
So the next day, I don't play with them, whatever, but I go back into the woods, you know, and I just take this big bag and I'm finding golf balls left and right. So I'm like, you know, all right, so what do I do with them? How do I sell them? And I'm thinking, okay, well, I remember on the 4th hole, it was a water hole, and I lost 3 balls there. So the 5th tee would be a really good spot. And I didn't ask the golf pro. I didn't ask anybody. You're just thinking. Was this scrungy-looking little 10-year-old that came out with a bag worth of golf balls and sold them on the 5th hole. And then I noticed that everybody was picking this one golf ball first, and it was a Titleist, and I didn't even know how to pronounce it. And I'm like, okay, this one's got to be worth more. This is way before the internet or whatever. But let me go down to the golf shop and find out what they're really worth. So I sort of got this marketing plan going, and then I realized after golf tournaments, a lot of guys didn't look in the woods for their balls, and most golfers hit it to the right. So then I learned kind of all the techniques. So it was kind of like The Apprentice, where you learn everything about business in a 10-year-old version of it. And so that was my first venture into it.
Wow.
My first big one really was fresh produce. And it started kind of in a haphazard way, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, we don't always have these massive business plans. We kind of stumble into things. And I had a hotel consulting business, which brought me to Sarasota. And I did that. And then I decided to go out and do something entrepreneurship. So I picked the perfect time to be an entrepreneur. My wife was 6 months pregnant with our first child, and we had a mortgage.
Wow.
Which is what I don't recommend anybody doing, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So I just decided, you know what, I can figure out something. So I stopped doing that. We're going to have a kid. I don't want to be traveling all over the country doing this kind of thing. So I just get a phone call from a guy down in Boca Grande, and he's looking for a tennis pro. I was working with the Colony and with Nick Bollettieri. And I said, well, I know a lot of tennis pros, and I recommended somebody. So the tennis pro then we hired, and they were really thankful. And they said, hey, look, we're going to open up this little condo and convert it into a store because we've got 250 rooms, and we don't have like suntan lotion and that kind of thing. So we're going to give it to the tennis pro. Well, he didn't have any money, and I didn't have a whole lot of money either, but I had more than he did. So he's like, hey, you want to go in partnership on this? So I'm like, I don't even know where you buy suntan lotion or sunglasses. Where do you get that stuff, you know? So evidently there was a show, and it was 2 weeks away, and it was in Orlando at the convention center, and they sold all those things. So I ran over there, bought a bunch of things, and I ran into fresh produce. They had a little booth. They were a really small company, and I just liked them. And so I think I had a $15,000 budget, and they were the first booth that I walked into, and I bought $5,000, and I'm like, oh, what have I done? You know, I got caught up in it, and it still happens.
There's still a whole convention center.
And you know how big it is, right? But so buyer's remorse big time, and I thought, I was too embarrassed to go back and cut the order down or whatever. And so I just carried it, and it just sold like gangbusters, right? And I really enjoyed these guys, and they were from Boulder, Colorado, and they were kind of hipsters, and they were cool. And
so this was clothing at this point?
It was clothing. Okay. Yeah, fresh produce clothing, sportswear. Tiny little company, and so we carried it or whatever. So about a year later, they sent out an email or some kind of communication and said, you know, we've been doing this for like 3 or 4 or 5 years, and we would love to do an all fresh produce store. We have 800 accounts. Is anybody interested? I'm like, oh, this is the best thing in the world. So where do I go? I run a St. Armand's, you know, which we're fortunate to have in our backyard. $5,000 a month rent for this little tiny strip or whatever.
Yeah,
and
this number keeps coming back around, 5,000.
Yes, right. So I open up the store. I sign a 5-year lease, $5,000 a month
Whoa.
with this line that had never, ever done this before.
Were
And
you
so,
like shaking when you're signing this lease? Like,
I always I'm ready, shoot, aim.
Okay.
And so I did it. And then when I get the spot and I look at it and it's got holes in it and it just didn't have anything. And I'm like, $5,000 a month, the house I could have bought for this,
right.
or something.
Yeah.
Also, I had to come up with the inventory and staff. And again, I had never done retail before. So anybody who's not really done retail, St. Armand's is not where you learn.
Yeah.
You should have your act together by the time you get there.
Right.
So I did it, and then remorse kind of kicked in, and I opened it up in July. And so I now have a 1-year-old, and I've got pressures and things to make money.
Mm-hmm.
The minute we opened the door, we were swamped.
Really?
And just mobbed, and it was July. And we literally ran out of inventory by the 20th day. We did not have enough
Wow.
inventory in there. And it looked like we were closing. People would
Right.
walk in and go, "You open?"
Yeah.
And then we opened second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth store all over throughout Florida. And then I ended up partnering with Fresh Produce.
I mean, at that point,
and
you're
at
kind of
that
like
point-
the magic ticket for this.
It
whole thing.
was,
Yeah.
it was. And I was going to ride it as long as I could. And with
Yeah.
fashion, you never know. You just don't know. So we did it, and it was a beautiful 25-year ride. So that's the part. And they went from $1 million company to a $40 million a year company during
Wow.
that time period. So
Wow.
yeah.
How did
was
that
my
make you
first.
feel? To know that was such a, I mean, it was probably a risk,
It
right?
was. It was a huge risk.
Yeah.
The funny part about it is I'd like to think, wow, my ability to discern, good business opportunities or whatever. But there were 3 other companies that I wanted to do a store on St. Armand's before that, and all 3 of those went bankrupt.
Ooh.
Yeah. So my 4th pick was Fresh Produce,
Okay.
and if the other 3 hadn't gone bankrupt while I was talking to them and doing it, I would have probably, jumped there and
Right.
gone down with them.
Wow.
So it's a combination of skill, a little bit of certainly luck, and
Yeah.
then, just maybe some blessings.
Do you feel like intuition really does drive you, as in, like, you can just sense when things seem to be on the right
Yeah.
track versus not? And is that why you feel like you're a good resource for people who are kind of in their first steps for entrepreneurship?
I'm way better now. It's an acquired skill.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I got lucky to begin with, and then I rode that, and then I learned along the way. And then, with retail, because we ended up with 28 stores, you go to a shopping center and you have to have a good instinct for, is this a good one? Is this going to be a good one? Is this a good spot? Because you're only as good as your worst decision. And there's plenty of businessmen who have made lots of good decisions and make one bad one and wiped everything out.
Right.
Jeff Boxworthy has a good line. He says, "I realize that I'm only 2 decisions away from going back into drywall." And it is that way,
Yeah.
And Fresh Produce certainly has had their ups and downs, most recently some downs. But when I sold in 2012, I kind of caught it right at the peak. But since then, I've gotten better at it. And I say with, like with guys like Ryan and Chris and some of these guys, that I'm going to share most of my failures with you because that's where I learned a lot of it. And so the success was, I did have a good feeling for it, but the good feeling was followed by 4 or 5 bad decisions that I realized quickly and then adjusted. And I think being an entrepreneur, being a business person, is those adjustments that you make.
Yeah.
And don't stick with a bad decision too long.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So do you recommend people have trusted advisors or just somebody to kind of be like, hey, I'm going to bounce this idea off of you? Or do you feel like lone wolf?
Absolutely. Bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
And I say to all these guys, I think one of the things about entrepreneurship is it's scary. And you look at successful entrepreneurs and you see them in chapter 17 of their life, but you didn't see chapter 1, 2, 3, or maybe chapter 7 or 11, or they've. And so, let me share some of the things not to do. And I know it seems completely apparent to you without any experience that this is a really good idea. But trust me on this one. I've got some background or whatever. But it's not always just trust me. I don't want them to change their judgment for mine, but listen to it. I can generally tell who's going to do well by how well they accept advice. It doesn't mean they accept it completely, but they absorb it, and there's a process to advice and taking it. And that's generally the best determinant of who's going to be successful in my mind. And I've worked, we helped a company called Outdoor Voices. And I knew her since she was really, really young, and she went to Parsons, and, she was just a sharp woman. So I had a head start with her, but she was just the sponge asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you're going to make it. It may not be the first time, may not be the second time, but you're just bound for success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anybody in your life that was what you are to, there's a huge list of people that you've kind of mentored. Who was yours? Who was the one that kind of
That's a
spoke into
great
you?
question, because I had a dad that was a cop. So there is nothing entrepreneurial about a cop, you know?
Right.
And he was always like, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, he really pushed me into going into the Navy, or he loved the idea of, like, I think when I first got out of college, a rental car company. He's like, good study. People always rent cars. You can have this. And I worked for a week, and I hated it, So I grew up in a really small town that didn't have a lot of entrepreneurs. Later on, I found examples, probably more what not to do than what to do for a while. And then when I started going out to Boulder, there was a guy out there who was really instrumental, and he started Blockbuster Video and this little restaurant company called Boston Market.
Oh, just little. Yeah.
And he's a very humble guy, and one of the things he always talks about is he says, when I was in the rental business, as if it's like the local U-Haul place.
Right.
Yeah, no, he meant Blockbuster,
Right, yeah.
So he gave me really good big picture advice, And at Fresh Produce, we had a couple hundred employees, so we hired smart people. And then I worked for the Four Seasons Las Colinas Resort out in Dallas, and iron sharpens iron. French chefs, Swiss hoteliers, Australian tennis pros, it was just a sharp group of people. And then when you had all these rich and famous people coming in, you couldn't help but gather from them, So it was a series of small interactions for a week, and then working with really sharp people. So I would say, without a doubt, that Four Seasons kind of hotel background was my real beginning.
Yeah.
Because coming from a small town, it was gas station owners. There's nothing wrong with that. They were all my relatives, but they were grocery store owners. They weren't entrepreneurs by any stretch. Yeah.
Did you ever eavesdrop or overhear, or just somebody straight out just told you something, like one of the rich and famous people? Was there ever a weird interaction that never left you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. There is one category, and I call it the best advice I never followed. Okay. And I eventually did follow it, but it was a career counselor of all things. It was just some expert in college, and he came through. And he asked us to go through this thing, and he said, write the 5 careers that you really want to do. Like where can you make a good living? Where can you get that security? Where can you get that? And back then, I really wanted to be in the FBI. I wanted some kind of government job, because my dad was telling me that. A CIA, I wanted to be maybe a U.S. Marshal, anything in that area. But it was affirmative action, so they weren't hiring white males for quite a while. So in that, I wrote that down, and maybe be a lawyer or a U.S. attorney or something. But they were all the things that my dad had done, maybe a notch or two up or whatever. But he said then, okay, those are 1 through 5. And he looked at everybody. He's like, cool, okay. So number 6, I want you to write down, wouldn't it be fun if, like I want to be a musician in Thailand or something, whatever it is. What's that crazy wild hair that you have? And I said, I want to own a surf shop in Hawaii, and because I just love the 50s and the 60s and that whole concept. And so he finished, and he goes, do number 6.
Ooh.
And I thought, what a great book that would be.
Yeah.
Do number 6.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I did 1 through 5. I tried all those things. And then I turned 35 years old, and it's not quite a surf shop, but it's beach related. And it was, in Florida and things. But I wanted to do that surf shop, So I always say to guys, what is it that you really want to do? And that's the best advice I didn't follow for way too long, and then eventually did it. The interesting thing about working, to get back to your question, with the rich and famous is, in so many ways, they're like you and I. When Elizabeth Taylor was staying with us, she would stay for 30 to 60 days.
Whoa.
And she was, this is going back in the 80s. She was the biggest star going, and she was married to Richard Burton. And I think at that point she was John Warner, the senator. But I remember her sitting in my office and just talking with Elizabeth Taylor. But it wasn't Elizabeth Taylor on the movie set. Yeah. It was Elizabeth Taylor in a bathrobe with cucumbers spread all over her face. So it kind of made her more human.
Yeah.
And the things they would share with you were really, really just amazing pieces of advice. Johnny Cash, I just adored. He would take some of my exercise classes. We'd go on a walk together, whatever. And he just had all these great nuggets of just.
Yeah.
But in most cases, they were really, really humble. And I always thought, I'm never going to be Johnny Cash or Elizabeth Taylor or whatever. But if I ever have some modicum of success, I really want to be humble. And two of the most humble people I ever met when I was in the comic strip business, Madeline and I got invited to visit Charles Schultz.
Wow.
So we went to his place in Santa Rosa. He was the most self-deprecating, kind, gentle man. And I have always said, when I get in a situation, what would Charles Schultz say?
Wow.
What would he do? How would he handle it? And the second one was Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio came through the resort, and I have this great picture of him with me or whatever, and he got to sit down for a while. And the cool thing about Joe DiMaggio was he knew I played baseball in college. I was a minor guy, he wanted to know about my baseball career, and he was sincerely interested, And so I think what I found from most of the successful people, it didn't mean that you have to be famous to be, extraordinarily successful in so many ways, was they were more interested than trying to be interesting. And I think,
that's good.
Yeah, I think if I were walking around, my aspiration is for people to say, oh yeah, he's interested in my life. And you don't run across too many people that are like that. Everybody tries to be interesting, but to be interested is really a skill. So I would say the people that I truly adored and admired were those.
Wow.
They were self-deprecating, they were humble, they were interested.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That should go on a T-shirt or something.
If only we knew somebody with a
I
clothing
know,
line.
right?
You know anybody? Yeah.
I'm very curious about Scoopdaddies. So you created that.
I did.
And was this kind of where in the timeline of your life was the surf shop in Hawaii and Scoopdaddies? Like, were those in the same time? Like,
yes.
Okay.
So Scoopdaddies was it was 2000. I think 1999, 2000.
okay.
So I started with fresh produce in 93. So I had 7 years retail experience. By that point, I had 3 or 4 stores. We were at Universal Studios. I think we were down in Sanibel. And so I was feeling pretty comfortable in the retail world. But I love the idea of entertainment while you're in a store. And so we always try to create these experiences. And the term back then, I think they still use it, is retailtainment. Retailtainment, right?
Okay.
So now with online, if you're a store and you just have fluorescent lighting and chrome four-ways and some slat wall, good luck, because you better have a really good product. But otherwise, you've got to create some kind of atmosphere that makes people really have that touch point to your brand, So I remember going into ice cream places, and I would see this big long line. It was like Kilwins, and it would smell like fudge and everything. And I think,
so
that's
good.
really, really good. That whole feeling, it's sensory.
Yeah.
But the decorations were a little bit, I don't know, nothing against Kilwins, but it's a little Applebee's-ish, or whatever. But the idea of fudge and candy and just created that atmosphere. So I'm like, all right, what can I do? Where's the niche for me to come into it? So I remember going over to Ben & Jerry's, and the line was 20 people out the door, with St. Armand's. Ice cream is just something you do when you're on vacation. So I noticed that they were making all of their money on the cash register, or where the ice cream was. And then the walls just had posters and stuff. And I'm like, I come from retail where we make no money on the cash register and we make all the money on the walls. So I'm saying, why aren't ice cream places doing things that have stuff on the walls to sell? So the problem is that ice cream and like clothing doesn't really match, because the kids running around spilling and things like. So what can you put on the walls? So I got this crazy idea. There was a store in Orlando that was all refrigerator magnets. And I thought it was just so cool. And I knew from Disney that they were selling like $2 million a year worth of magnets.
What?
And this is before stainless steel really got big on
Yeah.
it. But they were doing that much money and people don't go into Disney going, I think I want to buy a refrigerator magnet.
Yeah.
But when you get in there and you have 5,000 magnets to choose from, you just got to choose. You just got to buy one. And then you think, oh, well, about it with my friends back home, and say, for $4 I can send something. So I got the crazy idea of doing ice cream and refrigerator magnets in one place. And so
you need a refrigerator for the ice cream. It makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I wish there was that much thought into it. So stores next to me became available at Fresh Produce, and I thought, you know what, let's just do it. So we came up with this great name of Scoopdaddies, and it sort of had this 50s vibe to it. So we just went up to this big place in Atlanta called Moose Breath, and they have 10, 20,000 square feet.
Moose Breath,
yes.
What is
yes.
that?
It's a giant warehouse of 50s things and old Wurlitzers. And, you know, we found this giant Scoopdaddy guy who was from North Carolina. It was this paper mache guy, you know, like an old soda jerk. And he was Scoopdaddy, and we put him in the window. And it was so much fun. I realized that I opened stores because I really like to look for stuff to put in it. And then I don't really want to run it after that, you know.
Right.
So I kept telling people, you know, like, what's going to be? And I said, well, it's an ice cream store with refrigerator magnets. And they're like, what? You know? So I finally had a guy do a CAD design, and, you know, we rocked it with the 50s stuff. And you walked in, and it was just, you know, music playing. And we had the guys dressed up as soda jerks. We had the squirting ketchup, the fake, you know, pure entertainment. We did these 7-foot high refrigerators that were made out of fiberglass for shelves to put things in. And then we just did this... roofing, that tin roofing, where you've got the sort of the lines, you know, and then we took that and made it vertical so the refrigerator magnets lined up.
Ooh, okay.
And then that set everything.
Yeah.
So first day we opened up, we did $20,000. Yeah, I mean, it was out the door. We're like, oh my, we didn't have enough magnets, we didn't have enough ice cream, we didn't have enough, you know, we had Singing Elvis out there for the grand opening. So we knew we were on to something.
Yeah.
So we ended up selling it in the long run to a company that wanted to reproduce it, because I just wasn't interested in doing that and franchising. So we got all the license and everything. So we sold it. They had some problems or whatever. I think they ended up doing 3 or 4, and then it kind of fizzled a little bit or whatever. But they paid us, you know, handsomely for the idea. I think we had like 1,200 franchise requests in the first year.
Whoa.
Because people were walking and going, I've never seen anything like this. You know,
Yeah.
it was great. But it was just one of those crazy ideas where I just, as an entrepreneur, where you look for a need, and I just walked into ice cream places and I looked at it with a critical sort of retail eye and said, you guys aren't making enough. And I think we did 1.2 million the first year, and 600,000 was magnets and 600,000 was ice cream. So that 600,000 we never would have had while they were standing in line, you know, and it was just from the walls.
Wow. Well, there is another part of you going into places that, are you allowed to kind of talk about the Rum Company?
Sure.
Okay, because that to me is pretty wild, how it seems to be a trend where you kind of, you jump from things that don't seem to be correlated or like they would make sense. For instance, clothing, and then an ice cream shop, and then magnets, then rum. You're kind of like, whoa, where are you going?
Know.
So can you tell me about the Rum Company, and first of all, what got you inspired to do it?
Sure.
And then will you tell the story that's similar to this,
Sure.
where you kind of came in and did your magic?
So I've always liked rum, so that's a good place to start. And so I'm on I go up to Maine every summer for 8 weeks, and it's just the perfect time to sit and think and, you know, just kind of sit out in the dock. And it's just, everybody should do it at least for a couple of weeks. Just sit on a dock in Maine and think, you know, kind of like Henry Thoreau, right? So I'm sitting out there, and we went to Kennebunkport with some friends, and we were having rum drinks at this restaurant. We're overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. And we've all got our dogs with us. And we didn't realize, but there's this phenomenal public beach there in Kennebunkport that after 5 o'clock is open to dogs. Oh. So we let our dogs run, and the cold water and the cool air and everything, the dogs were going crazy. And, you know, we just finished the rum drinks, and I'm like, and I'd sold the company, Fresh Produce. So I'm thinking of what I want to do next, because I never really want to retire, you know. And I thought, you know, the rum, the ocean, the dogs running, this is just a great lifestyle. This is, I think people could buy into this lifestyle and this thought. So I just kind of, the seed started. So I went over to Total Wine, and I just looked at the rum, and I was like, there's 150, 200 brands sitting there. It's pretty overwhelming when you don't know anything. And it's, you know, a lot of pirates and a lot of ships and a lot of concepts. Everybody knows Captain Morgan, and they know Malibu, and they know all the Bacardis and things. And I thought, you know, I don't know, maybe this is another crazy idea that either I'm so far out there that it's not going to work, or I'm maybe an interrupter and a changer of things, you know. But I would love to do my next business where I give away a lot of it. And I don't know of anybody in the alcohol spirits world that's doing that kind of thing. And if they are, I don't know about it. Maybe they're not marketing it properly or whatever. So I find out now later that Tito's Vodka is doing it. And Tito's is really big. And of all things, dogs. And I really admire the company. So I always have sort of a business model or somebody that I admire. And there's an expression that says, work so hard that your idols become your rivals.
Ooh.
Right?
That's another thing that needs to go on a shirt.
Somebody else said it. I gave them credit for the first 3 times. Now I'm taking it as my own. But I read it somewhere and I'm like, no, that's exactly what I wanted to do, you know. And so I thought, there's someday I want to be sitting with Tito, and I want to be going, hey, I'm sitting with Tito, this is really cool.
Right.
But I really admired what he did, and he does just a simple vodka. He doesn't have 900 flavors or whatever. He designed the label. He worked really hard. Everybody kind of knows his story and knows his drink, and he's the most successful spirits guy. I think his company's worth $2 billion now.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa,
From
whoa.
Austin, Texas.
Wow.
His last name's Beverage, so he's destined to be, as something to do,
Exactly.
right? And so my last name's Irish, so I've got to be in some kind of spirits or alcohol, right? So I kind of admired him. I had the dogs, the beach, the concept, the rum. Fresh Produce is sort of a Caribbean-based look. It's bright colors. We're in the Sun Belt, from Southern California all the way through up to South Carolina. So I'm in the category, at least, of marketing and lifestyle of that. And I've always really admired Richard Branson. I like the way he's always smiling. He's having fun in business. He just looks like he's having a good time.
Oh, yeah.
And he sells, things that are products that have that kind of service to them. And and Jimmy Buffett's another one of my idols. So Richard Branson meets Jimmy Buffett meets Tito's. And so I came up with the idea of the rum, and it's called Sea Spot Rum. And so I came up with the name later, but the C is SCA, and then spot, and then rum. So our logo is a dog, and you can see the shadow and the connotation as he's running on the beach. So I'm thinking, all right, this is crazy or whatever, but I definitely want to donate to dog organizations. And I wanted, my dad was a 100% disabled vet. So I really like the idea of service dogs that work with veterans and service dogs that work with the blind and others. So that's kind of where my heart is. So I thought, I'm right off the bat, I want to start off, we're going to donate 10% of our profits to those kind of organizations. And then I eventually want to make it, I think it might be the world's first nonprofit spirit company.
Whoa.
Where 100% of the profits are, and it's a business that will just, perpetuate and donate money to all these great charities. But there'll be dog organizations that help humans primarily. So in kind of a roundabout way, it kind of was like a sauce or broth that kind of had all these parts that came together.
Right.
So once we came up with the name Sea Spot Rum, we thought, all right, that's really memorable, whatever. But is it? It's going to be accepted in the spirits world. So the first thing I did, knowing what I don't know, is I called a branding guy who's done great stuff all over. And I had dinner with him, and I had a hat made up and a T-shirt kind of thing, and I showed it to him, and he goes, protect it right away. Get the domain name, get the trademark. This is brilliant. I would buy this shirt in a heartbeat. I'd buy the hat. I would do these things. It's fun. He loved the logo. He loved the whole concept because it just makes you smile. Rum should make you smile. The ocean makes you smile. Dogs make you smile.
I mean, we all know dogs make you smile. Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, is the name, he goes, no, it's perfect, So I did that. I ran out.
That must have felt really good.
I know. And I felt like a little kid when I was presenting it to him, like, like the teacher, do you like this paper?
Yeah.
And so when he said that, and I'm always thankful for him, he has Rum for life, for helping me. So we ended up, I have a store down in Sanibel, and so I ended up printing up some T-shirts and some hats just to sort of test the market. Even before I had a rum, it's a crazy marketing idea or whatever. But I thought, what? Let me just see.
I love how you just said even before I had a rum.
Yeah.
Like all of this is happening without the actual product.
Without a rum.
Yeah.
I know. I think the standard way is, you love rum, you become a distiller, you open up a distillery, you make the rum, you do this.
Yeah.
No, the rum comes like, a year later, right?
Right.
So we start some T-shirts and some hats. So we're up to like $50,000-$70,000 in sales in these T-shirts before the rum has even come out. The rum doesn't launch till November.
Wow.
So I got the idea that people were liking the name, the look, the feel, and even with that, we had a little poster there that said, hey, the rum's coming out soon, but 100% of the money that you spend here is donated to, right now, Southeastern Guide Dogs and a few other. So I went out to Southeastern and I talked to them and I said, hey, are you guys, this is what I'm thinking, and I'd love to donate some profits to you guys. And Tito's does a lot with them already, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, we love the idea or whatever. So we've started a nice relationship.
That's so cool.
So that's kind of how it's merged together. So the hard part was the rum. So I tested rum for a long time, and some of your staff here has tested the rum with me. And some have tested more than others, actually. So
I love how
Why are you
Ryan
looking over at me, Scott?
I'm not going to name names, but
Why are
it
you
rhymes
looking
with
over
Ryan. Okay. So we, as I tested all these different rums, I found a couple that I really liked. And so I did the first thing that I always do. I hired a rum consultant. And this is a guy who was in the business and he helped launch companies like myself. And I said, hey, there's these guys that are down in St. Martin's. They make a phenomenal rum. It's one of my favorites. So I bought some and I sent it to him. And he's like, oh, this is good stuff. It's really good. And I said, I'd love to get, work with somebody like that and create, my brand and my thing, but maybe tap into their skill level. So he took me to like 6 other distilleries or whatever. And he's like, oh, these guys are good or whatever. And I go, yeah. At this stage in life, I don't like them. I don't like the feeling. I just don't. He's like, well, you're not going to find, this company, this magical company. And I said, well, then I won't do a rum. It's just simple as that. But I got to find somebody I really want to work with and somebody who kind of buys into the story and likes dogs, whatever. I just don't want a manufacturer. So I sent him this rum that I really liked, and he's a broker and other things. He brokers bourbon. I didn't even know there was bourbon brokers or whatever. But so one day he gets a phone call, and it's these guys in St. Martin's, the rum company. It's called Toppers. And he's like, I can't believe I'm talking to you guys. I've got a client who's really likes you guys or whatever. And he says, hey, would you mind having lunch together or whatever? And so they're based out of, they're based out of South Carolina. And let's just meet in South Carolina or whatever. So we have lunch with the guys and we hit it off really well. He says, well, come on down. We're family run. We've had a lot of people approach us on doing a rum, but we just haven't found the right company. But Topper, who's Topper's rum and it's inspired by, I think he's 80, 81.
Wow.
He's got to like you, and you're going to come into the family. He's got to like you. So no pressure, right?
Right.
So I fly down to St. Martin's. We spend 4 days together, and it was everything I imagined in a partnership. And so I had some ideas for the rum that I wanted to do, and they were really good at making a smooth rum. And we came up with this rum that we just absolutely loved. And so while I'm there, I think they've been around, 10 or 15 years. USA Today does Best Rum in the Caribbean contest. And they have a panel of 4 or 5 experts that kind of do it. And then the readers vote on it. While I'm there, they win Best Caribbean Rum. So again, sometimes I think life's rigged in my favor, that these guys and that phone call and all these sort of haphazard things happened. And I'm like, well, this is a pretty good decision. I'm sitting in St. Martin's, and I'm drinking rum, and I want to give a lot of it away, and I'm working with people I really, really love working with.
Yep. That's a recipe for great things.
It is,
all around.
And passion's a great alarm clock, right? So I wake up in the morning, and I'm like, I can't wait doing this, and I can't wait to write these checks to these companies and do it. I'm hoping maybe someday we get large enough that a really large company comes along. I think Budweiser has 62 craft breweries that they bought and brought into the umbrella. But I really think in the long run, a big company buying us and making it a 100% nonprofit philanthropic wing of their large collection of spirit companies would be the way to go. And then you have this sort of in perpetuity company that just maybe raises $10 million a year for these causes.
Right.
And so we're designing these programs so that when you buy a rum, say in a bar or restaurant, we feed a shelter dog, all these concepts that, so our first ad is it's got this cute puppy and he's got his tongue out and it says, our puppies can't hold their liquor, you know? And so we're sort of going for the heartstrings as well,
right.
you know? So that, you know, when you buy anything, when you buy Tom's shoes, you know, Tom's shoes right away, you think, oh, they're going to donate a pair.
Right.
There's this good feeling that comes along with the brand,
Right.
you know?
Was that the motivation then to do a lot of this nonprofit and, you know, donating to all these obviously amazing organizations?
Yeah.
Was this kind of the time in your life where you were like, I've done these successful things and now it's time to give back?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I forget the name of the book, but it's, I think it's called Halftime. And this woman wrote this great book, and it was for men at that point. The first half of their life, it's about riches. And then the second part, you reach the stage where it's about enrichment. And I'm in that enrichment stage big time. So I really, really want to give back. But it's more about leaving a legacy of a company more so than me. That's something that started that really done. And I look at Southeastern Guide Dogs as a perfect example. Somebody started a company a while ago, and it was a little 2-bedroom place, and it was training service dogs. And now you go over there and it's this $15 million campus, and they have, you know, 1,000 puppies come through a year that they train, and it's
And
this
have little
incredible-
graduations for
I
it.
know, it's so cute, right? So
Yeah.
when I'm over there and the fundraising they do, because there's, you know, these dogs, not only do they, you know, live maybe 12 years or whatever, but they kind of burn out at 7 or 8. So this blind, visually impaired person, this veteran with PTSD, they may need 40 or 50 years worth of it. So this company will then give you a new dog when yours burns out, and they do it free of charge. You know, veterinarian costs, everything are covered. And you go to the graduations and you hear these stories. You know, they graduate 12 at a time. There's not a dry eye in the place.
Yeah.
You know, it's just fantastic. So that drives me way more than the idea of doing another company or whatever, making money. But yeah, it's definitely about giving back, and not only giving back financially, but giving back of your time, and then maybe working with some young entrepreneurs that you may hear my voice, you know, 50 years from now, going, "Come on, give back, young man." You know, it's not all about you. You know.
Yeah. If there is one thing, if somebody's watching this and they're like, I'm potentially maybe thinking about trying to start something on my own, anything business related, because I feel like that's your wheelhouse, you know that. What would you say to somebody? What's like the thing, the golden nugget that you're like, if everybody can kind of hold this, it'll be better?
Yeah.
What's that?
It's a great question. When I go to parties or dinner with people and they understand what you did and you talk a little bit about your background, they're like, everybody's got an idea, all right? But they're working for a bank, they're working for someone else, and they're like, yeah, but let me tell you this idea. And a lot of times they're pretty good ideas, you know? So I've had this conversation many, many times, and I'm like, okay, there's a spot where every person who has a good idea stops. And they usually stop because they don't think they have enough money. They're fearful that it's not a good idea. They don't know the business that well. And it's that fear-driven part that stops them. And I'm like, I had fear too. You just have to go through the fear and feel like, you know, there's a good idea out there and I'm the person that can do it. But it's to drive through that fear. And I mean, that's for an entrepreneur, but that's, you know, good advice in general, is courage isn't the lack of fear. Courage is doing it while you're still fearful. And so, you know, as you know, I work with entrepreneurs and I love sharing because they think, oh, I'm coming in as this big successful, you know, and it's straight up, you know. And I love to start off with, I did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, but I still did it. I persisted. And so come up with a good idea, kind of break through that wall of fear. If it's money you're worried about, there's plenty of money out there. There's more money than there are good ideas. Don't be fearful of that part. And then they're like, yeah, but I don't know taxes. I don't know how to do it. There's bookkeepers. There's accountants that'll do that kind of stuff. Keep going, and don't let these obstacles get in your way. You know, I heard a great quote where a guy said, you know, a lot of people see a mouse trap. I see an opportunity with free cheese. It's all how you look at it, right?
Yeah.
So try and look at it that way, and don't just, you know, keep focusing on the obstacles, but keep thinking of this is a good idea. But go out and test it, because I do hear bad ideas, and I don't mind saying it needs some work.
Yeah.
Yeah. or there's somebody out there doing that and they're doing this, this, and that. And this is why I would think, but I don't want to discourage someone. I'm just like, okay, maybe try another angle.
Right.
My advice. Yeah. So I really want them to know that I'm honest, I'm authentic with it, but I'm also vulnerable in my failures.
Ooh. That was, I feel like if there was a mic to be dropped,
That's the mic drop.
that's the time
You
for
can
it to
drop it. It's just not
happen.
going anywhere. It's just gonna stay right where it's at.
I mean, now me asking about your New Jersey beach lifeguard and police officer days seems like such a far
Season 2.
Yeah, I was gonna
season
say.
2, right? The prequel.
Well,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
wait, hold on. If the rum is launching in November, I know this is coffee talk, but
We may have to do a nighttime show.
we may have to do a nighttime show.
Rum talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be very, very
yeah,
fun.
Yeah, it would be.
Yes. So, well, this has been a fantastic coffee
Yeah, I
talk,
enjoyed it.
Scott. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Rita.
And hopefully the people watching will, you just inspired a whole new group of entrepreneurs.
No,
so
that's great. That's great.
just get ready for a bunch
We'll
of people
just
to
link your email and
Yeah,
personal
to be
phone number.
yeah, thanks so much.
Hey, is this idea good? Well, this was so fun. Thank you so much
I enjoyed
for
it,
coming.
Rita. Thanks for having me.
All right, great job, guys. This is the end of season 1. We'll see you in November.